Antes de iniciar con esta actividad, les informamos que se encuentran señalizadas las salidas de este auditorio y en caso de emergencias les solicitamos respetar dichas indicaciones y evacuar por las zonas más cercanas a sus asientos. De igual manera, les solicitamos apagar sus celulares o configurarlos en modo silencio. La Benemérita Universidad de Costa Rica y la Escuela de Administración Pública les dan la más cordial bienvenida a la conferencia titulada Una agenda común de paz y prosperidad para las Américas, que será impartida por el señor Albert Ramdin, secretario general de la Organización de Estados Americanos, la OEA. Nos acompañan esta mañana en la mesa principal el señor Keilo Rojas Jiménez, director del Consejo Universitario, la señora Angélica Vega Hernández, directora de la Escuela de Administración Pública, y el señor conferencista de esta mañana, secretario general de la Organización de Estados Americanos, el señor Albert Ramdin. Un saludo cordial a las señoras y señores del Consejo Universitario, a los señores vicerrectores, autoridades universitarias que nos acompañan y a todas las personas que nos acompañan en este auditorio y de forma virtual. Vamos a iniciar con las palabras del director del Consejo Universitario, el doctor Keilo Rojas Jiménez, por sí y en representación del rector de la Universidad de Costa Rica, el doctor Carlos Araya Leandro.
The vice presidents, the institutional representations, the staff, the students, and the public that is here today. We also have authorities of the government, and I cordially welcome you, especially to the Minister of the Presidents. It represents a real honor for the University of Costa Rica to receive Mr. Secretary General. His visit is a great occasion to get together this supreme idea of a peace agenda of unity and prosperity. Such horizon demands a rigorous reflection and a promotion to reaffirm our commitment to the humanist values. We assume the responsibility to translate this knowledge in our work in a benefit for the country and the humanity. The American continent go through a difficult and complex period characterized by profound divisions and a polarization that fragments the social fabric. Before this, the public university represents an indispensable idea with critical ideas that contribute to a respectful dialogue so that this dialogue replaces the confrontation and the intellectual rigor is going to support our decisions. As an institution of higher education, we assume the responsibility to educate professionals at high level that will be in strategic positions. From this, they will be able to strengthen the structure of governance, to protect the fundamental rights, and to safeguard the institutional integrity. The vitality of our democracies requires to administer what is public based on excellence, ethics, and the profound understanding of our period. Likewise, as inhabitants of this planet, we are facing challenges such as the climatic urgency, inequality, and the peaceful application of vanguard technologies. This represents the aspiration of diplomacy that is going to promote sustainable development and social inclusion. The visit of our Secretary General allows us as a university to renew our trust in multilateralism, only way to overcome the events that we see every day. Such a conviction allows us to see all those actions contrary to international right, as well as the prolonged problems that are asphyxiating our populations in our hemisphere. I would like to pause to think about the problems that our brothers in Cuba are suffering. The organization of the American states and the educational institutes share a responsibility to resolve the conflicts, to promote respect to self-determination of the countries, and among everything to promote the respect to human dignity. It allows today to Mr. Albert Ramdin which diplomatic paths are profoundly recognized. He is going to deepen into the ways in which the inter-American system is going to use to face the challenges through this presentation entitled a Common Agenda of Peace, Unity, and Prosperity for the Americas. His reflections will provide invaluable light on the articulation of multilateral policies. I end with a call to universal fraternity. Our destinies, we only through mutual respect and cooperation are going to be able to promote a better future and the benefit of the future generations. Mr. Secretary General, this is your home. It would be a pleasure to listen to you. Thank you very much. Next, we will have the conference entitled A Common Agenda of Peace, Unity, and Prosperity for the Americas, presented by the Secretary General of the OAS, Mr. Albert Ramdin, elected uh, on March the 10th of 2025 in an extraordinary session of the OAS. His election became a historical event since he became the first secretary of a member of the CARICOM community. He's a experienced diplomat in international and regional affairs. He promotes a vision based on consensus towards the hemispheric contribution based on inclusion, sustainable development. His mandate of 5 years started May 26, 2025. Mr. Randim has made a special emphasis on the need of small states, including included Central America and the Caribbean, and he is made it possible for the OAS to work together with the rest of the members. He is a supporter of multilateralism and democracy based on principles. Mr. Randim brings with him more than 3 decades of experience. Before he was a general assistant secretary from 2005 to 2015, where he promoted dialogue, the conflict resolution, and the hemispheric cooperation. In 2020, he was appointed Minister of Foreign Relations, International Commerce, and International Cooperation in Suriname, a position that he occupied up until his election at the OAS. From his work, he promoted Suriname and promoted policies for sustainable development and the strengthening and the democratic strengthening. Mr. Randim,
Good morning. Great. It's one of the few audiences that responds when I say good morning. And that shows well. First of all, I want to thank, of course, the University of Costa Rica for the opportunity to address this this audience here, and especially our students, the young members of the hemispheric community. I want to thank you for being here and for your interest. I must recognize, of course, Dr. Kayla Rojas Jimenez, Director of the Council of the University, Dr. Angelica Vega Fernandez, School of Public Administration, and the different deans which are present here, university authorities, and professors. Being in a university, as I said before to Dr. Keller, is that it has its own spirit. It has its own level of energy. It has a feeling of security on the one hand, but also a sense of creativity. So I always feel very comfortable and very happy to be with university students and on campus of universities, always. I have done this type of conversations with students in Chile, in Peru, in Bolivia, and I think in Panama as well. So everywhere where I come, I speak to students and all those who are engaged with the process of learning. I want to thank the teachers, the professors, for their dedication to occupy such a position. Not everybody can do it. Not everybody is a great teacher. I'm not a great teacher, for instance. I speak a lot, but I'm not a teacher. So just to make sure that's why I never worked in university areas. We have to know our limitations, so to speak. I'm going to speak about three components here today. One is I'll speak about the context, the political context, the developments in the world, because they are important. We are very dependent on what is happening in the world and also what is happening in our own region. And after that, I'll talk a little bit about the Organization of American States from not only the historical perspective, but also from the value, the importance, the relevance of the Organization of American States. And lastly, I'll speak about what our vision is for the future of this Americas. A vision which we have developed, nothing new, but something which we have put together. And much of what I'm going to speak about is already happening, but it is important that we put it together, and I'll explain why. Let me start with a question, because that is what happens in colleges. Who had heard before of the Organization of American States in this room? Who had heard about La OEA? Okay, more coming up. Great. This is almost, I would say, don't verify this, but I think 55, 60% of the people here know the OAS. Because it is important to gauge that simply because in many countries, the OAS is not known, even as an institution, less about the value. So today when I speak about, and that has been the theme for this lecture, a common agenda of unity, peace, and prosperity in the Americas. That's exactly the issues I'm going to end with. That's the message I want to leave behind. A common agenda, a shared agenda with a purpose. And that purpose is prosperity and peace on the basis of unity and connectivity. Well, let me start by speaking about the world. What is happening today in the world is not unknown to you. Those who are studying international affairs are more aware. Those who are following the news on the television will be aware. It is after a long time around approximately 75 years in the world since 1945 that we have again open conflicts of a major dimension. Everybody thought that after World War II there would be no wars anymore in the world. That was the intent. That's the reason also why the United Nations was set up, to be a little bit a guardian of peace and stability of international law. Today, since a couple of years, we have a war in Eastern Europe. We have an ongoing escalating conflict in the Middle East of different dimensions. Keep in mind, it is one area with at least 3 different types of conflicts. And that has now become also a war. So we have 2 open conflicts in the world, and both of them have an impact on every single country in the world. So we cannot speak about distancing ourselves, even though they are far away, 10,000, 15,000 kilometers from here. We cannot distance ourselves because it will impact our lives. I'm not sure what the gasoline price here is today, but it is going to increase if it is not already increased. That's only one element, and gasoline is the basic of many economic activities. The shipment, the flows, the production, everything. So life will become more difficult, not because we created a war, because a war was created. The cost of war, the impact of war, the humanitarian misery that comes with war is basically telling me only one story. There is no one that wins from war. No one. It costs a lot. It costs a lot to repair, and often the repair is more costly than if we had done something else. War is not what we should aim for. So that policy is for me a given. If we do not focus on peace, dialogue, international law, negotiated settlement, we will end up with war and conflicts, open conflicts, physical conflicts with a high cost. And really, this is just one example in terms of the impact. The war in the Middle East at the moment, another area which will be affected. I'm mentioning only that one more. Fertilizers. Who would think that that has something to do with the war? The country which is impacted or is attacked here produces the majority of our fertilizers worldwide. So our agricultural products will become more expensive. The supply chain will become more expensive. And overall purchasing power in our pockets, what we earn and how much is left, will be deflated because inflation will increase, as well as the purchasing power, the net power to buy goods, will be limited. These are simple 2 examples where wars have a negative impact or conflicts have a negative impact on our societies. That is the world today. Nobody expected that there would have been a discussion in the world about the role of the United Nations, about the power of the United Nations Security Council, about the obligations which come with accepting international law and international humanitarian law, which are the framework for interstate relations in the world. But all those things are being challenged right now, completely. Also, multilateralism. Multilateralism is nothing else than the willingness of countries to, that is also being challenged. What is the value of multilateralism? And with that, what is the value of international organizations with that? I'm a firm believer in multilateralism and regionalism. I believe that there is no other option. Like war is not an option for me. I will never promote conflict. That is why I will never take a position for or against. I take a neutral position because I want solutions going forward. That is what will help us. But multilateralism is under threat. also the Organization of American States. So this is the international context we work in, that we do not have, in a global sense, the ability anymore to effectively respond to global conflicts, because the tools we had are not efficient enough anymore or effective enough. I hope it will change. But personally, I think with the evolving international context and the evolving international affairs and evolving diplomatic elements, we will see a new multilateralism emerging. What that will look like, I do not know as yet. But there will be need for a new multilateralism. It will not be the same rule-based order as was established in 1948 in the United Nations, 47. It will have to be amended. So in more definitive terms, we cannot say yet where we will end, because the process is still ongoing. We do not know what kind of responses will come to that process, that evolving environment of conflict. We do not know how the United Nations will regain its strength and be able to manage these issues. War should have been prevented through an international system of cooperation. That was not possible. So we are in challenging times, and we cannot take it for granted, but at the same time, we can't fight it. We must acknowledge it and find solutions going forward. So for us in our own hemisphere, we see similar things happening. In recent times, I say we have an interesting foreign policy in the Western Hemisphere. The Organization of American States is historically the institution that brings together all the independent countries of the Western Hemisphere. Regretfully, we have seen 1.5 countries leaving the OAS over the past 10 years. Nicaragua has left, your neighbor, and Venezuela is still a member legally, but from a political perspective, they don't consider themselves a member. But officially, they are still a member. So that is not good. That is weakening our hemispheric institutional framework. So also in our own hemisphere, we will need to develop a new multilateralism. And I'll give you some ideas, or is more important than the other, or more powerful than the other. The OAS has functioned on 2 principles, and we have kept that since 1948. One is one country, one vote. Whether you are such a small country with 60,000 people, or one with 240 million people, or powerful or well-developed, doesn't matter. Same voice, same power, same vote. So that's one. And I think it's a pretty strong principle that has still remained. The second one is, as much as possible, we take decisions on the basis of consensus. So voting is happening only when elections take place and when we have contentious issues. But generally, I would say for 95%, we take decisions on the basis of consensus. That means there is a process of dialogue, there is a process of negotiations, there is a process of consultation, so that we bring everybody on the same page. It's not always easy, but so far it has worked. Those 2 principles should not be lost. That will remain part of the new multilateralism. We also must have a multilateralism, and I'm looking then to ourselves, to the OAS, because we need to prove the OAS and other multilateral institutions must also prove that there is a relevance to the OAS, that we deliver, that we do things which are relevant for the people of the Americas and the countries. And so we have to become more pragmatic and result-oriented. This is something which we have started doing, is looking at what we need to do for the people. If the people do not see that the OAS does not help them to improve their personal life in whatever form, then for them there is no value. And this is where the trust in the system becomes weaker. So this is one of the things we believe will be important. There is an element in the last couple of years, and it did not start with the new administration in the United States, it started before that, where multilateralism and the international cooperation framework was based on dialogue with many countries at the same time. There is now a notion of bilateralism, of transactional operations. That means one country speaks to the other to achieve its objectives. You have multilateralism and bilateralism. And in my view, some of the bilateral elements will have to be included in the new multilateralism. It's still not worked out, but there are some elements that we need to make sure that the countries that are acting bilaterally do that in the context of multilateralism. And this is something to be worked out. Again, this is still going on. So we have an international and a regional context, which is on the one hand concerning. On the other hand, it is providing opportunities, certainly in our own hemisphere. In our own hemisphere, the situation in Venezuela, the situation in Cuba, Nicaragua have special attention from a political perspective. The situation in Haiti is a social, economic, political problem. These are 4 cases that require immediate attention. And all is meant to make sure that they become, that they follow the principles of the OAS in terms of democracy, human rights, security, and development, sustainable development. In this whole context of global developments, hemispheric developments, we have an element which is quite difficult, but is also part of the evolving international context, and it has to do with the geopolitics, the fight or the arguments between very large countries. We went from bipolarity, from bipolar world to a multipolar world, to something like a unipolar world after the Soviet Union was dismantled, to now something like a bipolar world again, but apparently we're still finding out how to deal with that. Okay? That context has an impact on us as well, on our own hemisphere, because some countries feel they have to choose between the one or the other. I'm of the view that every country is sovereign and can choose whoever they want, for whoever they want. But I think there is a more clever way. You don't need to choose. You need to look at your own interests, and based on that, have relations with both the United States or China. And we have to be pragmatic. Here is where pragmatism comes in. I'm not in favor of involving the OAS in a geopolitical struggle. That's at a global level. If we get involved in that, we will be bogged down in the agendas of 2 countries. We have our own problems. That's why I'm in favor that we solve our problems in the hemisphere, whether that's Venezuela, Cuba, or others, by the hemispheric community, by the countries in this hemisphere. We don't need to bring it to a high level. If you bring it to a high level at a global level, it becomes part of that fight between countries. And we will see how that works out, the placement. What we have to recognize is that since 1945, when you had the United States and Russia as the largest powers, that since then many countries have evolved to become rich, powerful, strong countries, economically, politically, and militarily as well. Today, we have more powers that occupy that same kind of the same kind of assets. So we have to find a way how we balance that. So in this competing atmosphere of powers, whether it's United States, China, and at a different level, maybe immediately below it, India, Indonesia, Brazil, and others, those are the emerging large powers. We need to find a balance, and the balance has to be based on your own national interest. Only then you'll make the right choice. But if you are forced to choose one over the other, you're choosing for a problem at a larger level. So these are complexities in this world. I want to indicate with the international context and the regional context how difficult it is. In our own region, a couple of other elements of complexity. We have an enormous diversity in the hemisphere. South American countries are different from Central America, whether we call them Latin America or not. We can ask ourselves whether there is still one Latin America. I don't believe so. There is too much polarization. There is too much division among countries currently. It's the most polarized environment I have seen in the past 30 years in the Western Hemisphere. Differences between political leaders, between countries, ideological differences, pragmatic reasons, and that doesn't help. I'll come back to the unity element. The other element is that, in terms of diversity, the Caribbean and Latin America are different. North America is different. So we are not a homogeneous composition of nations. We think that's the case because we call ourselves Americas. But that's it, nothing more. We are still very different from each other. And there is nothing wrong with that. In diversity, I don't see an obstacle or a weakness. I see strength. And that strength must be utilized. We have not done that enough. And you know why? Because we do not know each other. How many people know? Name me 3 capitals in the Caribbean. Here, right now. Not many knows. Kingston, Paramaribo, Georgetown, Bridgetown, and so on. How many Caribbean people know to name 2 of the 6 Central American countries? Not many. How many South American countries know the whole Latin America? We do not know each other. This is only in knowledge. Already there is a problem. What about culture? What about language? What about legal system? What about educational systems? What about tourism? Our sites. We still opt to go to the north for holidays. We still opt to go to Europe, Madrid, Paris, Amsterdam, London, Toronto for holidays. We do not choose Machu Picchu or Cusco or go to Argentina, to the Patagonia. We don't do that. I mean, I hope it will happen. Connectivity in the Americas is poor. Digital connectivity in terms of roads, infrastructure, airlines, and so on. Universities do not collaborate enough among each other in the Americas. The media doesn't know each other. Academia doesn't know each other. So how do we want to create a one united hemisphere? That's why we don't have one Latin America or one Americas. We have pockets of unity. We have a long way to go. And again, it's not a problem for me. It's an opportunity. Let's start with student exchanges between universities. Let's start with tourism, promoting tourism. Later on, when I speak about prosperity, I'll talk to you about what more can be done to bring this whole region together, because we need it. That is something I know. We will not survive with great prosperity if we do not work together. So that's on our own hemisphere. We have more challenges, okay, in the hemisphere, but I'll leave that for now. Let me talk about the OAS for a minute. The OAS is not an ID. It's really more than an ID. It should be a culture. It's a cultural phenomenon of an organization bringing independent countries with representative democracy together around one table. And that is something which has worked. It's the only organization in the hemisphere that can do that. There is no one else. There is no other organization. So when people ask me about what about then the Shield of the Americas, which was established recently, I said, I welcome it. It's a great initiative to fight international, transnational organized crime. But it's not a replacement for the OAS. The OAS cannot be replaced. Simple. It is a treaty that was signed in Santa Fe de Bogota, the charter which was adopted in Santa Fe de Bogota in 1948, that establishes the OAS. There is no competition. I don't see other organizations as competition. What we must do is we must work with them. We are not the only one to be able to achieve everything. We have to be realistic. We cannot do everything from out of the OAS. We are not a development agency. We don't have enough money. We can talk about the political process, fostering more cooperation and unity and making sure that there is functional cooperation. Many countries benefit from it. Election observation, political stability, strong state institutions, fighting corruption, and so on and so on. We do all of that, but we cannot do everything. So there is a place for every single entity in the hemisphere to do its work in collectivity. So the OAS is necessary. If it did not exist, we would need to invent it because it is necessary. You know why? A large part, more than 50% of our national challenges, you have it here as well. Our national challenges are cross-border in nature. Migration. You have many Nicaraguans here. You have many Venezuelans maybe here and others. It's migration. They have crossed the border. They have entered your country, legally or undocumented. That's for national authorities to determine. But they are here. How do we solve that problem without talking to our neighbors? Where they come from? Every single problem which we have in that basket of cross-border problems, whether it's education, trade, migration, tourism, trafficking, illegal trafficking, transnational organized crime, all of them require us to work together. We cannot solve all these problems which I just mentioned alone in one single space. It's impossible. So multilateralism is needed. International regional cooperation is necessary. Otherwise, we can't solve these problems. This is a reality which we must accept and support. Otherwise, it will not be possible. How can you solve a problem if you cannot talk to your neighbor or to the countries which are involved in creating this problem? That is multilateralism. That's where the OAS comes in, to facilitate dialogue, to mitigate conflict, to make sure that we offer a better prospect going forward. So Simón Bolívar, during the Congress of Panama, proposed this One Americas idea. And it was a little bit smaller then, but now we're speaking about the whole Western Hemisphere, the Americas. And that notion, that idea still is alive and is still relevant. And so are the founding principles of the Organization of American States. There are 4. Democracy, representative democracy, human rights, multidimensional security, and sustainable development. Those are the 4 pillars. And none of them are more important than the other. They are mutually reinforcing. Without democracy, you don't have development. Without development, you can't foster democracy. If you don't have democracy and development working well together, you'll get security problems. You'll get human rights issues. So all these things are interrelated. These four principles have not changed since 1948. That is, in 2 years' time, 80 years from then. So while the original goal and purpose of the OAS has not changed, what has changed are the circumstances in our hemisphere. Same thing as the circumstances that have changed at a global level. So we must adopt. We must adopt to the new circumstances and see how we organize ourselves in such a way that we can deliver on those aspirations. But we should be very proud for leaders like Simon Bolivar and others, independent fighters and freedom fighters, for having the vision to establish in 1948 and long before that the notion of one America, because it is necessary. And one America is needed for different reasons. One is the geography. That's a different notion than multilateralism and regionalism. Geography. Geography is a given, is nature given. We can't change it. It's fixed. It's absolute. Nicaragua is not a member of the OAS anymore, but Nicaragua cannot pick up Nicaragua and leave the hemisphere. The geography prevents that from happening, the physical presence. You cannot say, I'm picking up my country and I'm leaving because I don't want to be part of you anymore. That's impossible. But the consequence is that while they're not a member of the OAS, whatever happens in Nicaragua, whether it's on human rights, whether it's on democracy, whether it's on development, migration, it will impact all the other countries. That is the impact of geography of the Americas. So this is what Simon Bolivar saw. It's not only bringing the Americas together as a group of political independent countries, but the geography of the people. And you know, in the charter, I read it recently again, of the OAS, in the preamble where they announce the reasons for establishing the OAS, it spoke about, one, the unity of the countries, but it spoke about the personality of the Americas, like it was a person, the Americas, with its own culture and own identity. That is how they saw it. It's literally the personality of the Americas. So that is what we need to look at. We have an obligation far beyond, and there's a lot of work to be done. But why do we need, in the current context, to be more united and working together? Is because we do not offer enough opportunities for a safe and prosperous future for our people. And I say this because how much do we contribute to the global trade as Americas? Forget for a minute the United States as the largest economy, but Latin America and the Caribbean. How much do you think? 6% of the globe. That's almost 800 million people. That is not much. How much do we trade among each other as Latin America and the Caribbean? Not more than 15%. Europe, with half of our population, trades 70% among themselves. South Asia trades 55%, and that's of recent developments. These are statistics that are proven. We are not a strong hemisphere as yet. And for that reason, we need to build on that new strategy to make the hemisphere stronger, politically stronger, with more footprint in the global trade, more wealth, keeping the wealth in our hemisphere. Because if you trade among yourself, you keep the wealth in your hemisphere. Then you can invest in cutting edge technology. We can then invest in manufacturing, create jobs, and not everything is sent out somewhere else. We need to create wealth in this Americas. And we're not doing that enough. But it's a vision. It's not a national vision. That is the problem often, because political leaders often tend to look at the national circumstances. I look at the whole hemisphere. From a national perspective, I understand. They look what is, but if you look at the longer term, you are going to gain more from it if you do a perspective on an hemispheric policy. And this is part of our vision as a hemispheric policy. That's why I have proposed to universities, and I'm going to do it here again, to the School of International Law, International Affairs, train diplomats not as Costa Rican diplomats, train them as America's diplomats who understand the Americas, and from that perspective, do their work. It's a different thing. Europeans, when their integration process started in the 1950s, one of the first things they did, two things, a school for European diplomacy and a school for European law. Because you need people who do not think only nationally, but think regionally. We don't have diplomats as yet in sufficient numbers that think regionally. What is good for the region? Universities should make a separate curriculum on this, and I will fully support that, because it is really something which we need to build that unity in the Americas. And it's not going to happen overnight, okay? I may talk to it, I'm excited, but also I speak lightly about this. It will take 10, 15 years before we come there. But if we do not make a first step today, it will never happen. So that is the OES. In my view, I'm biased because I know the OES for far too long. But the OES is a necessary multilateral institution that has a role, that is relevant, that is functioning. Anybody who tells you that we are not functioning or being relevant or meaningful to the countries, you can tell them simply it's not true. And I give you enough examples of why that is the case. Now, the OES has done, and I'll go now to the organization and the future of this hemisphere. The organization has done a couple of wrong things. And that happens in institutions. You become lethargic. You become, at some point you need to reflect and reset the button again. What we have not done over the past 20, 50 years maybe is tell the story of the OES. Our people work hard, really good people, loyal, dedicated. All of the experts working at the OES, approximately 450 staff members, all of them are experts in their own way, but they can get a better job outside as well. But they chose to stay at the OES because they're dedicated to the hemispheric goal. So they are so much occupied with the work that they don't tell anybody else what they do. And that is something what I call we're not telling. Our narrative is a great one. Our history, our story is a good one. I like to tell the story. And the story is far beyond all the sectors in society. In democracy, with governments, with civil society organizations, with parliaments, women who are being educated in politics. When women run for an election, females run for on a ballot for parliamentary elections, the OES offers training to them to become better in their skills. And all of that. We have a school for democracy, open school for governance, and so on and so on. In democracy, we do so much. Election observation missions, improving electoral standards. We're doing that now, right now. We were here in Costa Rica a couple of days ago. We doing that right now in Peru, in Colombia, in judicial elections in Guatemala. So in the whole issue of democracy and the state, we are very active. We are not telling the story. We're not telling how many people are benefiting from it. So I have given the instruction that in every single area, multidimensional security, we deal with a lot with transnational organized crime. We deal a lot with migration issues, with security, with contraband, with illegal trafficking of persons, terrorism, training to national police officers, and so on and so on. In the area of sustainable development, every country is benefiting, whether it's water management or issues with regard to the climate, sargassum. In all those areas, we're active. Again, how many people know? Not many. So I take that responsibility to understand that we must tell the story, otherwise the people will never recognize that you're valuable. So this is the first thing what we are doing, is reforming the OAS, making it more efficient, more effective, more relevant, and putting it back on the stature which it used to have. It will take a year or two to get to that point. This is part of it, to talk to you. And I do that all over. All our secretaries coming from different countries are instructed to speak to the media, to academia, to students, to legislators, to tell them the story of the OAS. And it's a great story. But that is not going to be enough. Having a strong institution is one thing. This more important thing is what next? What next? How are we going to rebuild the hemisphere? So there I have two preconditions which we need to comply with and two objectives. That's the vision. Partly I spoke about this already. So I already told you our hemispheric situation is diverse and polarized. So the first thing we need to do is to connect among our peoples. If we do not connect, trust will not be fostered. You need to have trust before you start a relationship at the most basic level of two persons. Suppose a CEO of a company goes to a country and doesn't connect well with the people. It's trust. It's a cultural thing. If you don't have trust, it becomes very difficult to make a deal. That's simple one example. It goes in politics equally. We need to understand each other. We need to embrace ourselves. So connectivity in all forms is important. Then the second precondition is unity. Unity must be fostered by promoting, and this is a bit more difficult because we are speaking about politicians, and I respect politicians. Let me be very public about that. I respect politicians, but we have to maybe ask politicians to rethink a little bit what they're doing. I tried to say it nicely. To rethink. And the rethinking is this: what was the reason I was elected for? To serve the people in the first place, not to fight or to have a conflict or to argue, but to serve the people. If we keep that in mind, then possibly we can see eye to eye. That's one element of the rethinking. The second part of the rethinking is we do not need to always agree with each other. We need to agree to disagree. That's also an element of the new multilateralism. It is not always that we need to have everybody around one table who thinks alike. The diversity has to be expressed. Countries have different histories, have different attitudes, have different traditions, different cultures. They come with different values. We need to respect those. So what we need to create is a space, and the OES is aiming to be that space, where every country feels safe to be there, to say what they want to say, and if a country doesn't agree, well, then we agree to disagree. But at least we respectfully listen to each other, and we respectfully also try to argue about it and convince each other of a different view. But that's it. So that's the second thing, is we need to recognize the diversity and accept it. In the rethinking, it is important for those who make, who create development to also recognize that we cannot only focus on the problems. If we focus only on the problems, we will never come to a point of doing something with the result. Because the problems, some of the problems we can't resolve. So I have taken a different approach. I only put issues on an agenda if I know that they will be resolved. I don't put issues on an agenda which are not ready for the agenda. If a border conflict is not going to be solved, why would I put it at number one? that will kill the meeting instantly. Because it means you're starting with number one, within 10 minutes you're leaving the room, and then the rest of the agenda, which has some prospect, cannot be addressed. It's strategy. Let's start with doing things which can be done. Let's be realistic in that sense. That is also a call to our leaders. So these are only 3 elements of the rethinking process. How we can change unity, or how we can change the current polarized environment into more a unified approach. Now, once we have done that, unity and connectivity, and both of them will work together. I promoted today to the foreign minister here that it is important that CARICOM leaders meet with Central American leaders, that they should have a meeting because of connectivity, learning each other better, but also understanding each other's political views. If we can't do it at the hemispheric level as yet, because the Summit of the Americas cannot take place for some reason, let's start at the sub-region. So there are ways how you can foster more unity in the Americas. At the sub-regional level is an excellent position. So once we have that, my notion is simply this for the OAS and for the whole hemisphere. I think for too long, the OAS has, or maybe I should be more broader, the Western Hemisphere did not have a vision. We had activities, we had meetings, but without the comprehensive, the construct of a vision, the overarching vision. And without an overarching vision, there is no, you can hold on to things as a guidance. So here is what we are proposing as a vision for the Americas, based on unity and connectivity, is that we need to create more peaceful, just, safe societies where there is an equal opportunity for all. That is the end result of the peace agenda. The peace agenda is part of our vision for the hemisphere. Foster democracy, strengthen human rights, making sure that healthcare is in a good shape, that we educate people, that we provide a safe space, that means security, deal with the security issues, and that we provide opportunities for all minorities, all marginalized groups, everybody. A more equal, just, free, fair society. That's the peace agenda. Slowly we can build on that. We are already doing that. And most of the countries, and let me be one thing, I'm very proud that we have moved, and we have to accept the positive things as well. It's not all negative. We have moved from dictatorships in the 40s, 50s, and 60s and 70s to most of them, if not all, democracies in today's world. That's an achievement. There was a meeting held in Panama in 1956. I think 15 presidents at that point from independent countries attended the meeting. It was one of the hemispheric meetings. You know that out of the 16 or 15 presidents who were there, only 3 or 4 were elected. All the rest were dictators. And they spoke about democracy and cooperation and human rights and everything. That is not the case anymore today. So we have to be proud of the achievement, of the progress which we have made in terms of democracy. We shouldn't forget the progress which we have made as well. So when I say a new vision, I think it's time for a new vision going forward. In the prosperity agenda, it's a simple recipe. Make sure that everybody has an opportunity to flourish in society. Equal chances, equal opportunities. Women, the whole gender issue should be included, the marginalized communities, Afrodescendientes, indigenous communities, but also opportunities in terms of choice. So, I mean, these are issues which we should discuss in society. It will not happen overnight as a perfect situation, but at least let's work towards it. That's one part. The second part of the vision is, because we cannot live on democracy, we cannot eat it. It provides a comfortable space, well, we can't eat it. So we need a prosperity agenda. And the prosperity agenda is to work with the private sector, to work with governments to create a modern, innovative, cutting-edge society. That means investments, more trade, more production, more trade among each other, more investments among each other. We can be energy secure and food secure in this hemisphere if we all work together. No country, nobody has to live in poverty. Fighting poverty, because of all the conflicts, poverty will increase. Fighting poverty is one of the key parts of a prosperity agenda. Everybody needs a job. Everybody needs to know that they have a future, their children have a future, they have a good education, and society can flourish. If we have that combination of a free, fair society with prosperity, that's the Americas you want. That's then where we have delivered for the people of the Americas. That's what I'm looking at. That's vision. So that is the vision: unity, connectivity, peace, and prosperity. That vision is something which we promote strongly. I must say that we're getting some good feedback and responses. And again, if we can achieve from this prosperity peace agenda 30%, I'm extremely happy if that happens. We shouldn't put the bar too high, because then you'll get disappointed if it is not achieved. So we need to be strategic and also realistic. Now, on the issue of modernity and innovation, we are here really for the CETEL conference here. The Inter-American Telecommunication Conference is taking place in Costa Rica, hosted by Costa Rica after 4 years. We are here simply because I recognize the importance of technology in this day and age. The importance of technology in terms of its impact on society, the AI revolution, the issues with regard to cybersecurity, issues with regard to data collection, data analysis for marketing purposes. It's happening elsewhere. We need to become part of this cutting-edge society. And so we have been supporting CETEL in this regard, but governments as well. So this is also something which we need to realize, that we need to apply innovative ways in our management, in our service as governments to the people. It will avoid corruption, it will avoid long delays, it will be more efficient, things will go faster. But we have to adopt this and invest in it. And I'm happy at the university that there is investment in technology. It's critically important that lots of funds go from the government into these type of educational investments. Yesterday, I was also at the Inter-American Institute for Agriculture. If you see what they do with cutting-edge technology in terms of providing measured water requirements to certain plants by plant, that's the way to go if we want to produce. I said we need to involve everybody in society, a whole of society approach. It is not governments alone. Don't blame governments alone for underdevelopment. It is the responsibility for every single individual, because you're part of society, you're part of one of or the other group. You're part of academia, you're part of media, you're part of civil society, expert groups, NGOs, you're part of political parties, of the legislation, of the government, of the private sector. We all are each individually responsible for what is happening in society. Take up that responsibility seriously. And that is my message to the youth. Get involved in these matters. There is a decline in understanding, but also appetite for political roles. And I know you're disappointed for a good reason. I'm not going to go into that. I want to be able to travel. But don't see that as a disappointment. See it as a lesson how you can do better. So I think it's important that we get a whole of society approach and a whole of America's approach. How far I am? I'm doing fine? Okay. 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 let me say a couple of final words. We have different challenges at a global level. We have serious challenges which can destroy lives of people with extremely high cost. Okay? I hope we can mitigate that. We are working on that from our side, behind the scenes, and so on and so on. But one thing we always should realize is that whatever we do in our work individually, from wherever we come, and with the individual responsibility which we have, there is only one planet, ultimately. We all will suffer if something goes wrong with that planet. There is no alternative. If we keep that in our mind and say that to each other, to yourself every night, we will remember that you need to put your best foot forward to make sure that the next day will be a good one. And this is more philosophical, but if we do not remember that notion that we live in a planet that is only one planet, environmental degradation, conflicts, poverty, insecurity, transnational organized crime, these are all threats to our livelihood, to our systems. We need to address them. We cannot sit and wait. So for us at the OAS, it's an inspiration to work with member states, to listen to member states in the first place and to guide them and to find ways forward to improve situations in our small way. But we also work with the whole Inter-American system. ICA has been here for more than, since 1943. And I commend Costa Rica for hosting such an important institution. I said we are food and energy secure. We can be. We are not as yet, but we can be because of the work of ICA. They can provide you with cutting-edge technology. They can provide you with information on how to and what to plant and so on in a way that is professional and it's scientific, but it will help us create food security. We do have sufficient fertile land if we do not further degrade our region. I know that Costa Rica is one of the countries that is very much on the environmental track. So that's one. Energy security, we can be energy secure. We don't need to depend on the Middle East or on others. Argentina, Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, Brazil have been traditionally, Venezuela, oil producers. Venezuela is still has still the largest oil reserves in the world, more than the Middle East. But there are two countries, Suriname and Guyana, have now become oil producers as well. If you put all of that together, and there would be a strategic alliance between all these countries, we are energy secure more than ever. That means we can finance our development, both in terms of money as well in terms of the energy needs. But how many countries invest in from our region, from South America, Central America, in those two countries? Almost zero. And this is a multi-billion-dollar operation. Guyana and Suriname will become the second largest basin of energy in 10, 15 years. Who benefits from it? Total Energies from France, Exxon from the US, Petronas from Malaysia, Chinese companies, Italian suppliers. Where are our Latin American investors in opportunities? So when I say we can become energy secure, it's only if we work towards that vision of having an energy secure Western Hemisphere. But the opportunities are there. We are not a poor hemisphere. There are rare minerals where we can flourish on. But we shouldn't export the rare minerals. We should demand that the processing takes place here, that there is transfer of technology to our people, and that we get a higher share in the value chain of these minerals. I mean, these are real opportunities. That is the vision which leaders should look at. And it is possible because it's a reality. If I'm not speaking about other regions in the world where you don't have that. I don't know how they will do it, but we do have opportunities. So we have a great prospect for the future. The OAS will be ready to support and be ready to work with countries and the private sector in making that happen in a small way and to make a start. Again, our agenda of unity, peace, and prosperity. I know it's ambitious, but it's achievable. Otherwise, I would not stand here in front of you. But we will need two things. We need the collaboration of all in society, and we need to act now. With that, I thank you very much, and I hope it was useful to you. Thank you very much.
We're going to have a space for a couple of questions. Just raise your hand. We are going to have some people passing the mics. Pueden hacer la pregunta en español o en inglés. El señor Ramdin habla perfectamente español. First of all, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Ramdin, for being with us today. From the perspective of geopolitics that you mentioned at the very beginning, especially making uh, mentioning the environmental areas that you mentioned, given the circumstances of heterogeneity and the differences in our countries, I would like to ask you about the following. I've been thinking about that. I work in the area of international commerce, international trade, and I would like to ask you a question about a common agenda of the OAS having to do with some meeting points or meeting issues that some countries could have given the problem with fertilizers and what this represents for food safety. I know firsthand that in many Latin American countries like Colombia and Brazil, Argentina, I think that also Paraguay and Costa Rica is already beginning to work in the area of bio inputs. And I think it is important to find a common agenda given the circumstances that we depend on fertilizers that eventually will affect our agriculture and that precisely at the same time is going to affect our food safety. The use of inputs is important since this cooperates with sustainable sectors, generates employment, uh, provides knowledge transfer, and eventually this may be a good meeting area, meeting issue among different countries. Maybe promoting a sector that could help the Americas not to depend on fertilizers coming from other countries. And perhaps we could work together in Latin America. My question is, do you have a common agenda in the OAS that focuses on these meeting points where we could create some options, supplementary options, not to depend from fertilizers, given the point that we are all agricultural countries and that this could represent a risk for our food safety. Good morning. My question has to do with whether if this agenda of peace and unity can actually help to close this gap of civil trust that we have in concerning public institutions. Since efficiency management is what we use to validate democracy, so my question is maybe in that spirit. First of all, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being here. My question will be, in order to reach prosperity that you mentioned in the agenda, I think that the public sectors have to know how to work. My question is, what kind of guidelines do you suggest for these alliances to be more transparent and generate a public good without putting into a risk the general welfare? Gracias por su visita a Costa Rica, secretario general. Mi pregunta tiene que ver con la paz. Los Estados Unidos ha implementado ideas para las Américas para intervenir a los carteles y las acciones de los narcotraficantes en los diferentes países de las Américas. ¿Cree usted que esta es una buena idea que nosotros tenemos que apoyar en en la OEA? Y también, ¿en qué formas que nosotros podríamos implementar otro tipo de ideas? Por ejemplo, ¿cómo se podría incluir esto en la agenda de la OEA? Mi segunda pregunta es, ¿cree usted en términos de paz que lo que ha pasado en Venezuela, la captura de Nicolás Maduro por los Estados Unidos, piensa usted que esta es una forma correcta de lograr la paz y de transicionar hacia la democracia? Muchísimas gracias.
Of agricultural development, I think one of the key things will be to have national policies on agriculture in terms of food security. Every country, and I think most of the countries have their food security strategy developed or in implementation. It's about good use of fertile land. And there are a couple of elements which we need to really focus on and promote. One is the use of technology, because land may not be always available in the same amounts. So in the number of acreage, especially with climate change, as it becomes colder, the higher mountainous groups areas will become less useful for agriculture purposes. That has been decided or determined already. So using technology to create higher productivity at a more in a more healthier fashion is one. The use of fertilizer should be as much as possible be avoided, of course, but that's from a health perspective. From a production perspective, it's often necessary. So it's a question of how we balance that in terms of use of organic fertilizers as well. The OAS is not a specialized body on agriculture. For that, we have the Inter-American Institute for Agriculture right here, and we have another institute called CATI that is providing scientific and teacher education. In terms of agriculture, we need to also focus on cooperation. So technology, effective use of fertilizer, but also cooperation between countries. And I say this because every country has a certain climate that is conducive to producing a certain type of vegetables or grains or whatever agriculture product. So not everything will grow everywhere. So you need to have that collaboration where you can supply each other so that we can get this issue of food security from a more hemispheric perspective. In terms of the peace agenda, the second question was about the public institutions. If I understood it correctly, I know there is lack of trust, and for good reasons, in public institutions, efficiency, capabilities, and delivery as well. That's something which every country is struggling with. I think that, and I mentioned that already, is that innovation is important. We must modernize our societies to create an e-governance structure that is really functioning and that surfaces the people. But not only that, but that also creates trust in government services. In many countries, that's happening already, but it is not enough. I think we should go in a higher pace with the transformation of societies into a modern, innovative machinery of services to be provided to the citizens. Not only citizens, but also the private sector. Licenses, custom forms, immigration forms, and all those things, passports, should be done quicker and more efficient. It's an investment that countries need to make in a determined way. The issue of public, I think it was much more about public-private partnership and the transparency of that process. In my view, private sector should be a very important part of any development initiative taken by governments. In my view, governments should stay out of business. That's not their job. So this public-private partnership should be based on very clear terms that when we agree, there is need sometimes to do public-private partnerships, especially when it comes to infrastructure, road infrastructure, bridges, and so on. But it must be under the clear understanding that is based on sound commercial private sector fundamentals. The private sector leads the development in that sense. They create the jobs, they pay the income, they create the productivity. The government should regulate, facilitate, and protect with that the people they serve. The last question was about drug trafficking and whether this approach of the United States to take action towards transnational organized crime and the illegal trafficking should be adopted or not. Look, personally, and as Secretary General, I think it's important that countries realize that we need to address transnational organized crime in a much more effective way. And the United States has a certain approach. That approach can only work if we comply with two conditions. One, human rights should be considered and respected every time. Everybody has a right and has a right to a humane behavior, humane treatment, and due process. Those two things should be part of the process. You cannot randomly kill people without investigation. I'm not speaking about the United States now because I don't have their intelligence, I don't have their information. But as an OAS, where human rights is a principle, we must always protect the right of the people, whether they are criminals or not. There is a judicial process that needs to be followed, there is due process. So under those conditions, stronger, more effective, more forceful fight of transnational organized crime is necessary. And I've said this publicly that we need to possibly grant law enforcement agencies more capabilities and rights to intervene in that process. I say this from a very pragmatic perspective. International organized criminals do not abide by the law. They do whatever they want. They don't know regulations and rules. They kill at random, depends on what their interest is. They traffic people, money, goods in whatever form they want, without any rules or regulations to abide by. And they have been able to buy themselves influence in society through corruption and money laundering and all of that. That we cannot tolerate. They can buy technology, they can buy weapons much more than law enforcement agencies, because law enforcement agencies are bound to constitutional provisions. They're bound by legislation. They have to abide by the human rights and all those things. That limits their capability. Again, I'm not in favor of a free for all. I'm in favor of expanding the capabilities of law enforcement in such a way, and maybe for a certain amount of time, but with human rights also recognized. So it is a balanced way of saying give them more powers, otherwise they will always have this unequal battle. The criminal organizations are here and the law enforcement is here. We need to close the gap so that it becomes an equal battlefield. And for that, they will need more capabilities and instruments to do that work. It's otherwise, we're not going to win that battle, regretfully. So what the US is doing in that sense, I support, but not when it's random and without due respect for human rights and due process. In terms of Venezuela, this is a matter that where exactly the Secretary General has little or not much to say. We should abide by international law, whether international law was breached or due process, that is up to member states to decide. And in the OAS, all the member states have given their views. There is no common position on this. I speak only on behalf of the OAS when member states have a consensus position. They don't have as yet. And as I said before, I don't take on a personal note side. What I want to do is make sure that anything that happens in Venezuela is Venezuelan-led in terms of going to a full democracy, is Venezuelan-led and to the benefit of the Venezuelan people. That is the key thing, nothing else. We do the same in Haiti, Haitian-led for the Haitian people. We can help, we can only help, nothing more. But this is my view. We are ready to help in Venezuela in terms of promoting national dialogue and consensus building, and also the roadmap towards the elections and then proper transition. But we will always be involved as an OAS in a very constructive way. We're not going to be divisive. We do not want to be part of the problem. We want to be part of the solution. Thank you very much.
And now, before closing, we would like to have some final comments by the director of the School of Public Administration, Dr. Angelica Vega Hernandez. More than comments, I would like to thank, first of all, the Secretary General for his willingness to be here. I would also like to thank, on my behalf, not only as director of the School of Public Administration, but also as a scholarship from the OAS, that at a given moment I had the opportunity to find the funds to carry out my master's degree coming from this international agency. And then I was able to transfer this through specific projects on which I work on nowadays, along with the staff, that is my colleagues from the OAS, that are Maria Fernanda and Silverio, for example. These are opportunities that we should generate, and as the Secretary General says, all the things that we can do for the improvement of the societies is based on the trust. The Mr. Secretary General is here because of an important relationship that we have between the School of Public Administration of Costa Rica
in the government school of the OAS. And for that reason, starting this moment, we are we are open to new projects, new processes, and I would not like to finish by not thanking the students that are present here today. Guys, you are seeing us here today, but then you're coming behind us, developing the future, new projects, and you're going to come later after us, and it is important for you to prepare yourselves and understand all these elements that the Secretary General has shared with us today that are super important. And finally, I would like to thank Dr. Jesse Reyes, who is Administrative Secretary of our university, because at the moment that they called me from the School of Governance of the OAS, immediately she made herself available to this, and up to this moment, everything has been perfectly timed to have the presence and the participation of the excellent Secretary General. Thank you all for your presence. And to close, we would like to deliver on behalf of the University of Costa Rica an acknowledgement to Mr. Secretary General and Mr. Ramdin. Ese es un pequeño obsequio de parte de la universidad para usted. Muchas gracias. With that, we have concluded this activity, and we thank everybody's presence, and all of you, thank you very much, and good day.